Hi everyone, this is Allan McKay. Welcome to episode 174. Let's talk about goals and 2019 and setting ourselves up to not fall off. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Allan McKay podcast. Allan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Allan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Allan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on allanmckay.com.
Have you ever sent in your reel wondering why you didn't get the call back? Or what was the reason you didn't get the job? Here's the thing, most of us think you just put your latest work on your reel to some cool music and send it off, and then you get the job. A lot of us aren't aware that the majority of the reels sent to studios are skipped through and sometimes never even watched in the first place. The fact is, everything we're taught about landing a job as an artist is wrong. Over the past 20 years working for studios like Industrial Light and Magic, Ubisoft, Blur Studio, I built hundreds of teams, hired thousands of artists, and reviewed tens of thousands of reels. That's why I decided to write a book from the perspective of somebody that actually does the hiring. Learn the exact formula to captivate and qualify you as the obvious artist for the job, how to build a reel that ranks high on YouTube and attracts studios to you. The best part is with this book, you can get it right now absolutely free. Whether you're in design, games, TV, or film, go over to allanmckay.com/myreel. Okay, 2018 is almost over. If you're listening to this later, all of this is still relevant. I hate when people think, well, that's 6 months old. Surely how to negotiate money has changed in the last 6 months or whatever it might be. So keep that in mind that no matter what time of year, this is applicable. But I want to sneak in this subject because I think it's so important. And a lot of us look at the new year as a way to get a fresh start. Next year is going to be better. I'm going to change things up. So keep that in mind that we all kind of go through those phases, and I'm always looking for an excuse to say, all right, time to reset, time to set new goals and fresh start. Let's do this. It doesn't need to be the new year. It could be the new week. But more importantly, what I want to talk about here is not about setting goals. I obviously have covered a lot around these subjects because they're so important. If you don't have that direction, if you don't have that compass, you're not going to get anything done. But what's just as important as setting goals is being able to see them through. And I want to talk about some really key mindsets around this that will set you up for success and prevent you from dropping off. I think this is really important. I've tried to keep this episode extremely short. So that being said, if you want to check out the show notes, go to allanmckay.com/174. Me personally, I'm setting a lot of big goals for next year, and that's more around consistency. I love the fact that we've been consistent. We've not missed a single episode date. Everything's been consistent all year round. And that's more my team's doing than me, making sure that I am staying on point. And that's one thing we talk about in this episode is accountability. But I'm really excited because I want to give more. This year I put out at least 100 hours of free, high-end training and content, in addition to the podcast and everything else I've been doing. We're going to be improving the website. It's going to be updated every 2 or 3 days. I'm hoping we're going to get to that point this coming year with video content, with articles, with so much more high-value content. I'm excited. There's going to be so many cool things coming up. And more importantly, even this month, I'm going to be putting out more training. I've got so many big plans for next year when it comes to free training I'm giving to you guys. There's going to be lots of cool stuff. I'm excited. I'm excited about everything coming up. And I've been setting goals like crazy, but I've also mostly been just setting goals that are around the consistency because I'm always setting goals and I'm always moving forward and executing, but this is more about getting that consistency, building that machine of consistency, making sure that there's fail-safes in place to make sure that nothing ever does fall off. So, 2019, I'm excited for you. Bring it on. But more importantly, for you, I want to do the same. I want to talk about our goals. I want you to set goals, but more importantly, I want you to practice what I'm putting into this episode to make sure you stay consistent, to make sure you stay on point, and to make sure that you don't ever fall off. That what you start, you finish. So that being said, let's dive in. So really quickly, I wanted to put together this video. I think one of the big things that we're all setting out to do over the Christmas and the New Year period is always to set a New Year's resolution. And I think that's a really valuable thing to do. Statistically, most of us, 80%, drop out by February. We set our goals. We say this is going to be a new year. We're going to turn over a new leaf. We're going to get out there and achieve all of these big things we set out to do. What happens? We fall behind. We give up. We get distracted. We receive some friction with what we're doing, and we just drop off completely. So I'm always a huge adamant person about setting goals. I always have been, and that's because that's how you get things done. I think that New Year's resolutions or any excuse to set a goal is great. However, the execution is where most of us fall apart. Any excuse to set a goal is fine. It doesn't need to be the new year. It could be June, it could be whatever. But the more important factor of this is to actually do it and to execute on that. So here's the big thing. Most of us set a goal, and usually it's going to be a year-long thing. So we usually have an extended period of time that we want to accomplish this thing. I feel like having a one-year goal, like next year I'm going to do all these things, it's too long a period where you kind of ease into everything. And eventually, when you haven't accomplished what you intended to achieve by June, July, whatever it might be, suddenly it's too late in the year. So next year, that's going to be the goal. I'm a huge adamant fan of 90-day goals, 90-day year, and that is to have a very condensed period to set out and accomplish something. And that way, by having such a tight turnaround, it means that the pressure's on. It means that you have to yield the results right away. You can see your failure. As soon as you start to veer off and not get the results you need, you can course correct. I think in general, like I always say, attack with urgency and fail fast. In other words, do everything with a compressed timeline, as well as knowing that if you are failing, to be able to fail quick, iterate, and get back on track. So, in other words, rather than setting extended periods of time for goals, have condensed goals. Like have in the next 6 weeks, the next 12 weeks, this is what I want to get done. And you can have bigger goals that may take a year, that may take 5 years. But that's the big thing, is to think about how to break that down into achievable chunks. So a lot of the time we look at really impossible goals and we think, yeah, there's no way that I could achieve that in a year. But if you were to think, well, what could I achieve in 5 years? Anything's possible. So having a bigger goal and then breaking that down into smaller steps is how you're able to achieve that, and breaking it down further and further and further. So the most impossible goals, the goals that I have had so many people laugh at me about when I was younger, saying, I want to do this, I want to move to LA when I was 14, I wanted to move to the other side of the world and work on set in Hollywood and work for all these big studios, work with these big directors. That to me was a big goal that everyone said you can't do. And I knew I could do it because having just to say, I want to achieve this may sound unrealistic, but breaking that down into sizable chunks until it literally is step by step, for me, I had a roadmap. It was easy to accomplish that because all I had to do was follow the recipe, tick things off as I went, and had a timeline of how I needed to accomplish every single bit of it. So key thing about that is to break things down into sizable chunks. Anything is doable when you break it down enough. It frustrated me recently when I did the Venom training that I put out. I had people saying, I want to break into visual effects. I want to get a career in this. Obviously, I'll never work at ILM, but I want to at least be able to work in a commercial somewhere. And for me, it's just like, well, why can you not work at ILM? What's holding you back? You. That's the only thing. Your beliefs are the only thing. So breaking things down into steps. Work at a commercial place. What's the next step? Maybe get into features. What's the next step? Maybe relocate to London, Singapore, San Francisco, Vancouver, wherever requires you to be able to work at that studio that you one day have dream of working out. Having those bigger goals is what's going to drive you, and it's going to be your compass. But obviously, the execution is the big thing. I think that sharing goals in general is a bit of a negative habit at times, because a lot of times people have their own pain points. Maybe they had a bigger goal that they never pursued, and because of that, they push that onto you. They kind of crush your dreams because it wasn't possible for them, or they didn't at least entice that idea. So I'm selective in who I share my goals with, but I think that having people who you do align with, those select few people, sharing your goals is a huge necessity, because you need that accountability. You need people who believe in you, and more importantly, are willing to push you and kick your butt when you're not doing what you said you're going to do. I think it's really important to have accountability partners. Having someone that you could check in every 2 weeks and say, here's what I accomplished, here's what I'm setting out to do, in the next 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, check in and say, hey, I didn't hit my goal, and this is why, but I'm going to do it now. Or, I hit my goals, and now here's what I intend to do next. Having that feedback is really critical, and having that dependency and accountability is really important too. The main thing that I want to talk about is to do with the execution, because I think for a lot of us, like, now is a great time to set a New Year's resolution. That's awesome. Go do it. But more importantly, break it down until it's manageable. Have a compressed timeline. So don't set out with a 1 year thing or whatever. Have set goals that the next 3 months I'm going to do this, this, and this. Provided I get that done, the next step is I'm going to go and do these things. And bit by bit, you can measure your success. So as long as you can measure it, then it gets managed, as Pete Drucker always says. So that is a critical step. But I like to think of goals as a muscle. The more you work it, the better they get, the easier things become. And the more that you abandon them, the more that you fall off, the more that you distance yourself from your goals, the more that they atrophy. In other words, they lose mass, they shrink. When you break your arm, you're in a cast for 6 months, and then you take the cast off, and your arm's shrunk. It hurts like hell. It's painful, and it's going to take a long time to get back on track. So at the same time with that, a lot of the time when we do abandon, or when our goals atrophy, that's when they become pain points, because you know that you're not doing what you should be doing. And because of that, you end up just distancing yourself further. You avoid it. You avoid leaning into that pain. So it's the most critical thing is to not allow that to happen, to stay consistent with what you do. And I think that's the big problem, is that a lot of us mean well when we set out to make goals, but instead of staying consistent, we say, I'm going to do this. And we set goals that may be unattainable in the time frame we have, or whatever it is that we decide eventually to give up and distance ourselves from it. But at that point, that's where we lead to failure. So I like Bill Gates as a good example, I think, where everywhere I read, I keep hearing, even in like those just all over the internet, pictures, videos, everything, people always refer to like, Bill Gates reads a lot, and that's awesome. That's great. But what I find interesting, I watched one lecture from Bill Gates where he was talking about how he tries to read a book a week. And I know people who read a book a day. You can go for quality or quantity, but I like the goal of like one book a week when you're busy as hell. Like that's a really amazing goal to have. But more importantly, what I love about what he said is that there are so many books out there that he really wants to read, and he is naming all of these books that are big books, and one day he's going to read them. But the interesting thing about that is that he's not willing to pick them up unless he knows that he's able to put them back down. In other words, he's not going to take on a task unless he's 100% sure that he's able to complete it. Okay? Given his schedule and everything else, the time that he can commit to something, he's only willing to commit to something if he knows that he can see it through to the end. And I think that is way more fucking powerful than I read a lot of books. being able to commit to something and see it through. I'm guilty of that. There's plenty, I didn't intentionally use that as a background, but there is plenty of books that I have read, and there's plenty of books that I've read some of, and there's even books I've read several times almost to the same point, and then I drop off. Then there's other books I've read 20, 30 times because they were that impactful. But key thing about that is that you're only willing to set a goal if you're going to see it through to the end. And I think that a lot of us, we get so proud and we're happy to tell everyone that this year is going to be different. We're going to do all these big things. We're going to get out there. We're going to break into visual effects. So we're going to earn this big financial goal that we have, whatever it might be. And it's easy to say that and get that dopamine hit and feel good about ourselves that, and tell everyone that we're going to do this thing. But it's even more rewarding when you're able to actually cross it off the list as complete. And the hard part is not starting a goal. The hard part is finishing a goal. The hard part is completing a goal successfully. And I always think that, do you want to, when you hit that resistance, give up? Because I think with anything, when we talk about skill learning, it's one of those things, like any goal that's worth doing is going to be difficult. Nothing that's worthwhile doing comes easy. And I think for a lot of us, that's the big problem, is that we either set goals that are too low and too achievable, too easy, and there's no challenge there. But then you go and you set a goal that is way more complex, way more difficult to accomplish, and you're going to hit resistance. You're going to hit obstacles. You're going to have these walls that you're going to have to overcome. And that's the tricky thing, because a lot of us give up. We're like, wow, this is difficult. Wow, I don't have time for this. Whatever excuse that we make for ourselves, we decide to move on, avoid it, go back, start again in a different direction. Surely this isn't the right way. There must be a better way. It must be a simpler way. In other words, let me give up and start again and go through the same cycle over and over and over. So I think of that, and I think I want to lean into those skills, because every time I hit a wall, that's when I lean in. That's when I give it everything I've got, because that's the reason I'm doing it, is to hit that hard part and to crush that. And once you crush that, the next time you come across it, it's not going to be hard anymore, because you've acquired a new skill. These mightn't be the big picture, title skill that you said, but all of these build up. So building these skill sets, overcoming these obstacles, like leaning into those pains and those fears that you have, getting those done, you're never ever going to have that pain again. Suddenly that obstacle you had is now easy, and bit by bit you're acquiring new skills, you're growing, you're getting better. So I think it's much more rewarding to lean into these and to overcome them, and bit by bit everything becomes easier, and eventually you can say, I've achieved that goal that I set out to do. And it's a lot better than adding it to the pile of things that you abandoned, adding it to the pile of things that you gave up on. For me, that is not who I want to be. I want to be someone who welcomes the pain, the resistance. If you sign up for a new course and you get to a bit where you're like, man, this is really tricky, there's got to be a better way, or I'm going to look for a different solution, a different piece of software, this is taking too long. You're making those excuses to avoid dealing with that thing. But what if you do overcome it? What if you go, okay, well, this is what I signed up for, this is what I'm doing, you're leaning into it, you're going to overcome it, you're going to beat it, and then you never have that problem again. You look for new problems to squash, and bit by bit you become more competent and confident in what you're doing. So you don't let your goals atrophy. You lean into them, you stay consistent, and I think that is really important. Making the excuses to avoid things is something that we all do. And I think that it's better to welcome those things. When I find something that I have that knee-jerk reaction, like I'm scared of something, like someone says, oh, I went and did this, and I'm like, wow, that sounds terrifying. Suddenly I'm like, great, now I've got a new goal. That's something that I got to go and push myself at, because if it's something that is a fear, it is a pain, there's something around that, then yeah, I want to push into that. So with all of us, I think that's the critical thing, is to not only stay consistent and show up, but to pick goals with the commitment to finish. And I think that that's where most of us drop off. Most of us set out with, I'm going to do these goals, and the minute you hit that resistance, that's when it's like, oh, this is really difficult, so I'm going to go and do something easy. Like, where's the accomplishment with that? So I like Bill Gates for the fact that he can pick up a book only if he's prepared to put it back down, not start it and then get distracted. And I think that as us, with our goals, we need to do the same thing. We need to set goals. We need to set difficult goals. We need to embrace and anticipate that they are going to be tricky. And for me, I'm always trying to anticipate the problems I'm going to run into so I can minimize the struggle that I'm going to have by preparing myself better. But I'm only going to pick up a goal if I'm prepared to see it through to completion. So with the goals that you set out, maybe they are too big, and that's fine. It just means to extend beyond that 1 year. 5-year goal, but what can I do in 1 year? What can I do in 3 months if I can press that down to get this done? But is that measurable, and is it achievable? And more importantly, am I committed to seeing it through to completion? So every goal that you set up for the new year, I want you to see it through. I want you to be able to commit and say that this I'm going to do by this time. This is something that I can do by this time. What are the problems I'm going to run into? How can I prepare myself better and minimize the fatigue, the risk, the atrophy that I could run into, so that way I can stay consistent and keep hitting at it until I accomplish it, until I acquire that skill. I can add it to my skill set and move on to the next one and the next one. And suddenly that bigger goal that other people might have laughed at you about and you didn't even think that you could do yourself is now not only accomplishable, but you've crossed it off the list and you're looking for the next big thing. Again, it's all about acquiring those skills. The more you do it, the less resistance you're going to get. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will be back next year. In other words, January 1st, I'm going to be back with another episode. I'm going to be talking with Noel Trejo. Again, I'm Australian. I butcher everyone's accent, everyone's name. But Noel works with Sony, doing a lot of art direction, and has a huge amount of experience and a lot of really amazing insights that we're going to be talking about on all the films that she's been a part of. It's going to be a lot of fun, and that'll be next episode. I've got some really cool ones coming up with Goro Fujita from Facebook. I'm doing one which I've been hinting and teasing about for years, which is I'm going to do my first ever email teardown, which is I'm going to go through a lot of emails that I've received of people applying for jobs or offering their services to me. And I'm going to share a lot of insights and deconstruct what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. And I'm going to be brutal. I am not going to be as constructive and nice about it. I'm going to be constructive, but I'm going to be right to the point. I'm going to say things the way that I or anyone else would interpret their work, their email, their pitch to me, with zero sugarcoating. So I'm excited about that, and that's going to be coming up. There's a lot of really killer episodes. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm also going to talk about the subject of working for free, dealing with piracy. As someone who does develop courses, this is something that's definitely been an interesting subject. There's been times even this year where I've questioned whether or not to completely just shut down everything because of the costs involved in running these things. Like, to run these courses, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars when you look at it per year, and that can have a massive impact. And I want to talk about that subject. I think that for all of us, I think that'll be really valuable to discuss openly. And there's so many other episodes. I'm really excited. I think that this every year has been such a huge growth. And as we get into next year, I really want to raise the bar with what we're doing, the content, everything. And on top of that, if you're not aware, I've been posting a lot of content on YouTube, Instagram, I try and do daily. So I've got my little hub of places that I'm putting out high-value content regularly, as well as, of course, my inner circle, which is where everything goes. So more to come. One last thing I'll mention is if you check out my YouTube, which I guess just Google it, Allan McKay YouTube. I just put up a visual effects case study of Venom, and this is another thing that I'm going to be regularly doing moving forward, which is I'm going to be deconstructing feature films, sequences of feature films from a supervisor perspective. So this is something that I want to do regularly. I'm still figuring out the consistency. It's going to be at least once a month, but I really kind of want to do it more than once. But at least once a month, I'm going to be putting out a full-blown YouTube episode deconstructing all of the big visual effects sequences and how I would approach them as a supervisor. And I think that that is very unique in the fact that I've not seen anyone do anything like this before. And I think that it's going to be really valuable for all of us. I think there's still going to be a couple of people who are more in the junior level who are going to complain because they'll be like, this isn't useful to me. But it's because you're not at that level to really be thinking about how to do your job better. You're more looking for the cheats, the hacks, the things that are going to allow you to fake it till you make it rather than really dive into being a strong artist. So there's always going to be that, which already, because I put it out privately to about 60,000 people. And there are already people like, this needs to be more technical, and it says a lot. But I'm excited. This is something just like the email teardowns. This is something that I've wanted to do for years, or at least for the last year or two. And it's based around what I've been doing inside of my mentorship. In production, I do dailies. In the mentorship, I do live reviews, and it's the same thing. Giving feedback and deconstructing how to do something and the direction to take it. But also, when I'm given a treatment or a script, you need to figure out, well, how are we going to do this? And it doesn't mean that it's necessarily how it was done, because you're not in the trenches doing that yet. But it is breaking it down into, this is roto, this is fluid, this is texture cheat, this is comp, all those different bits and pieces. So I'm excited for that. That being said, it's nearly Christmas here, and I'm wrapping things up for the year. Big things planned, but I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. Honestly, the amount of work and money and everything that goes into this is not easy doing this podcast. And the only reason I do it is because of the results that I hear from you, the emails that I get, the feedback, the success stories of how this episode or that episode has impacted your career. It always blows my mind when I meet people who I idolize and they're like, man, I'm such a big fan of the podcast. And being in Portland at the moment, I don't get rando people coming up to me at lunch saying, I love your podcast and everything. But, whenever I'm in LA and that does happen, it's just like, it's really rewarding, So again, I just want to say thank you for listening and staying consistent with this. And I hope that the value that I am trying to put out is something that you're taking advantage of and applying, and hopefully getting the results that you want back from it. And if you ever want to email me, go to my website, allanmckay.com. I read everything that I receive. I try to reply to as much as I can. And I'm really excited to see what we've got in store, both for you and for me in 2019. I'll be back next episode. Until then, Happy New Year. Set these goals. Be consistent with them. Set a goal only with the seriousness to see it through to completion. And I wish you the best in your success, and I'll be back next year. Rock on.